Welcome to Network Automation Heroes, where we speak to the creators, the designers, and the dreamers of network automation all around NetBox. Today, I'm joined by the guys from Evolver, and we're going to be talking about scaling network automation without the Barney rubble. I put a Cockney rhyming slang reference in here on purpose because I believe your guys' office is it still bang in the middle of London?
It is, yeah. It's in Moorgate, so you can probably hear the Bow Bells from there, so I'll give you that one.
Very nice. All right. We're going to start by doing some quick introductions. We might as well make it easy and go left to right. Steve, maybe you could tell us a bit about yourself and how you ended up here today.
Yeah, sure. Steve Corp. So I've worked in around networks for a long time, mostly financial services organizations. We set up together with Vlad, who's here, and Dan, our other partner, Evolver Technologies, almost 10 years ago. And the idea was to do network automation, but do it with the new open source tools that were emerging, plus using our own code and putting it together that way, rather than buying big proprietary products, which there were a few around at the time, but not many. And yeah, and we've been doing that ever since.
Perfect. Thanks, Steve. Vlad?
Hi, everyone. Vladimir Kupriyanov, Vlad Kupriyanov. So, the same Steve, hardcore network engineer, worked primarily in financial services on behalf of Cisco, doing automation from 2014. So doing coding, Python, using all open source tools, etc. So.
Cool. Thanks, Vlad. And last but by no means least, Marco.
Hi, everyone. I'm Marco. So put simply, I'm a software developer, software engineer. So that's how I started my career. The thing is that you can see me as a automation guy, just because I don't like to do the same thing over and over. So when I do something, I make it so that I don't have to do it ever again. And that is actually called automation in the field. So I moved into the DevOps world, and of course, cloud is a big part of it. From the cloud, you can see, public clouds, but also private clouds as well. And from that, Kubernetes and all the others, IAC tool like Terraforms and stuff. And now we're just playing with those tools really and trying to make network also automated. So that's
perfect. So cloud wasn't painful enough. You thought, let me try.
That's it.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just going to explain for any who haven't seen these before, just the general format that we try to follow here. We are going to be talking about a specific tool, Kriten, that the guys at Evolver have put together, and see some demos around that. But what we like to do in this series is to talk about the problem we're trying to solve first. And this can go many ways, but in the chats that we had before we met today, we identified a few sort of problem areas that we see out there in the wild where something like Kriten would help. So I'm just going to step through those. And the first one is, I went for Karl Marx quote, but network automation is born free and everywhere it is in chains. So what do we mean by this? Well, I pulled some data from a recent state of network automation survey that was done by Seamus McKilligoody, who we follow over at EMA, where he pulls out some pretty stark statistics, right? Like down the bottom here, we can see 91% of companies interviewed have a specific network automation budget, and 75% of them are planning to increase that over the next 2 years. So it seems like everybody's talking about network automation, everybody's investing, and everyone's very excited about it. But then when you compare that to how it's going, only 18% of the people surveyed say that they consider their network automation strategies to be a complete success. So obviously a lot of investment, a lot of excitement, but not a lot of results is sort of the biggest problem that we're talking about today. And you guys have been in all sorts of businesses for a long time now, helping with network automation and networks. Does this tally with what you've seen? And maybe you could even talk to us about some of the problems, like what might be leading to these numbers?
Yeah, it's definitely in agreement with what we see out in the field. So there's a lot of interest in network automation. A lot of people are taking the first steps from a pure networking background in using Python. And there's loads of utilities and stuff out there now when we started, there wasn't that much actually. So, Ansible was just about a thing, I think, when we started. So there's a whole lot of stuff you can do now, and people are happy to experiment with it. A lot of the customers we work with, I guess because of our background, we've worked with financial services customers. So, they're regulated environments, they've got tight change control. There's not a lot of scope for to go from experimenting in your own sandbox environment to actually get it into production. So that can be quite a big problem. And yeah, there's definitely the desire to do some stuff. There's also, I think, I was kind of expecting when we started the company that network automation would be done by now, and I'd be retired on a beach.
You'd be on a boat, yeah.
On a boat, but that's not happened. And I think if you look at what has happened over that time, things like Ansible have come along, Terraform, this kind of thing, and the adoption and usage of open source software has become more acceptable in big organizations, where a few years ago it wasn't. It was buy a product or do nothing. So everything's moving in the right direction, but there's still these barriers to go from I've experimented with something, I've got a good idea, we can do it a bit better, to, or how do you actually put that in production now? How do we support it? What happens when you're not here? All of those kind of things start to come into play, to go from I've got something that works into I've got something that's in production, and it's touching thousands of devices in our production network. So that's a definite gap there, and that was really part of the motivation for us when we thought of the idea of Kriten. We mentioned earlier, actually, Marco mentioned about DevOps and Kubernetes and that kind of thing. So we do, as a company, we do work in that space, and we've used some of the principles from that discipline into network automation. So a lot of people get really scared when you say Kubernetes. It's like, oh, very complicated, all this kind of thing, which it is undoubtedly. But once you've got it up and running and set up, it's a huge enabler. So, a lot of stuff that you'd have to do yourself, Kubernetes does for you. So that was, and we don't see it going away. It's getting more and more popular and deployed everywhere. It's like a de facto now.
Yeah.
So that was partly why we based it on Kubernetes.
We're definitely seeing that growth of Kubernetes as well. And what I think is interesting is that it's often a little scary for maybe the networking team, but in a larger organization, they might find that people are already running Kubernetes elsewhere in platform teams, etc. I don't know, Marco or Vlad, if you see that.
Yeah, definitely. So if you look in application development world, like typical developers, I think it's almost like de facto that wherever they go in any company, there will be containerization, and there'll be Kubernetes platform where you can test and run your applications very efficiently. So, and what we don't see that infrastructure developers treated in the same way is like because they would benefit the same way as application developers benefit from running their tools and their automation scripts or whatever as containerized apps.
Yes, there's only one thing that I wanted to add. I think Kubernetes, one very important thing that brings to the table is the declarative approach. Because with that, you don't only enable reproducibility of your resources, but also, if I had to look at it from like developer point of view, right, where I have the code, I have a bug. So to debug my problem, I go back to the code and I reiterate until I get the state that I want. You basically can do the same thing with your infrastructure now on Kubernetes. And so if you have ultimately all of your networking that is defined declaratively somewhere, and you have a problem, you know where you have to look for that problem, which is into the code. Whether if you don't have that defined, then you're pretty much left on your own and you don't know where to start looking. That's the kind of feeling that I get.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think we see that generally. I mean, my career has kind of been that. Like I started out as a software engineer, then I ended up doing DevOps, then I moved into Kubernetes, and now I'm down at the network. And it's kind of like the same process happening time and time again. You see the same patterns shining through and being useful. Let's dive down a layer deeper. The second sort of problem space that we want to talk about is the scaling. And you touched on this a little bit, Steve, like scaling our automation methods in a collaborative way is still painful. So I pulled out, the classic works on my machine kind of meme up at the top right here. But I think what we see is, I actually don't have a link for the survey. Maybe it was a network automation forum question somewhere, but it was like top problems with adopting network automation. And one of them, I don't know if it was number one, but it was pretty high up, was just getting permission to do it in the first place, or getting permission or time. Like you see a lot of people trying to fix things in evenings and weekends to make their jobs better. And I think part of that means that people who are, probably under quite a lot of workload already are trying to make things better, trying to sharpen the axe. What they're really trying to do is build a case for network automation in their business by showing something off. And I think, all of the advice that we see out there is start small, start maybe by just reading from the network and not writing to it so you can show the value.